Hi, everybody, and welcome to our webinar, Managing Macs in the Cloud Forward Enterprise. We're going to get started now. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Greg Keller, the Chief Product Officer for JumpCloud.
Thank you, Shane, and welcome, folks. We're happy to have you here today on this webinar series brought to you by both JumpCloud and our friends from Minneapolis, Minnesota, Jamf. I'm Greg Keller. I'm JumpCloud's Chief Product Officer, and I'm joined today by Jonah Clevisall, who's the Enterprise Alliance Manager for Jamf and someone I've known for quite some time. Jonah, happy to have you aboard.
Happy to be here. Thanks.
So today, folks, what we are planning to do is to basically lay out a problem space that I know Jamf sees with their customer base, and JumpCloud certainly does as well, and that is, quote unquote, the Mac problem. We're all here because we're Mac enthusiasts, but as this particular endpoint is propagating to the enterprise, we want to illuminate some management and security needs that all of you as professional IT and specifically Mac administrators should be accommodating and strategizing over as you move Mac into your enterprises. So we'll be talking about macOS best practices, and then finally talking to you today about how tightly integrated Jamf and JumpCloud are with our integration. So without further ado, let's move into it. First, let's diagnose the quote Mac problem. And all of us, in fact, on this webinar are either using Mac, administering Mac, or are thinking about the sort of introduction of Mac into the enterprise. From our perspective, we're seeing a radical rise in the macOS endpoint within businesses, large and small. In fact, the last decade, I have been building companies have almost exclusively been Mac endpoints servicing our employee base. So while it's not a big sort of surprise to me, there are many, many industries and companies that haven't been as lucky as we are to use Mac, but now they're seeing it tenfold. Let's talk about some data and statistics regarding this. Less than a year ago, there was a great statistic on Mac that was produced by StatCounter. These are folks that clearly ingest data of all different types on browser usage, among other things, including operating systems. And what we saw in this is very interesting. Obviously, we know Windows is dominant within the quote enterprise, both the higher end of the small to medium enterprise, but certainly they own the lion's share of the global 2000 and above. If you are a company that quite frankly has been around for the last decade and your employee counts are measuring in the thousands, it is highly likely that you're using a Windows endpoint and probably have a complete Microsoft stack managing it, including SCCM and Microsoft Active Directory. Furthermore, you're watching what was a predicted sort of decline in Windows 7 and an increase in Windows 10. Microsoft did a shrewd move by providing a free and fairly simplistic upgrading system to older endpoints, specifically Windows 7 and 8 and 8.1, to get these folks migrated over onto their operating system. Very tactical, if not strategic move on their part, because they know they have IT administrators and companies now have choice in what their employees really want to bring in, and Mac is really driving that. About a year ago, Mac, or Apple in this case, owned just about 10% of the overall market share, but that is now increasing. We're looking forward to seeing the June 2017 stats so we can see a year-over-year kind of snapshot in this. So now let's talk a little bit about the security implications of Mac. For me, here, let's move into this next slide. For me, Mac and its sort of kissing cousin Linux has always been the sort of quote blanket of security. I always felt that if you're using Mac, and clearly if you're using Linux, it's just really hard for the bad guys to do their work against those operating systems. Windows, as we know, is just ripe for introduction of malware and other viruses, and it's just been a sweet spot for, again, the dark hat guys to go and do their bad business on that operating system. And Mac and Linux have always traditionally been a little bit harder, but what we found is that's really not the case. So this is basically a snapshot of some of our analysis of the various kind of viruses and attack vectors that have happened to the Mac OS X operating system in roughly the last decade. And it's not good either. It clearly, it pales in comparison to the injection points that a Windows machine has had over the same time period. But we have to really embrace the fact and frankly educate people that just by using Mac doesn't inherently give you a default sense of security. So we'll talk about how to better secure your Mac endpoints in this webinar. But again, the point here is really think smart. And the bad guys are targeting Mac OS X as well. So when we talk about the best practices of security, I want to challenge you and the team of folks that are out there right now on what you are doing from a playbook perspective to really lock down those Mac endpoints. And I'll go through a few things that we kind of advise, and to be very honest, we learned from witnessing our really progressive customers that are thinking security involving Mac, and they've taught us what they've done. And frankly, some of this is a snapshot of what our customers are doing on a daily basis. So let's go down this checklist. The first and foremost is account management on those boxes. You really have to scrutinize who can be administrators on that Mac and who should just be standard. Furthermore, is there a strategy to remotely enable a sudo or command to allow them to install software, or should they always be a standard user? Another huge aspect is out of box, when you unbox your Mac, it comes defaulted with this guest account. Using a product like Jamf, you can set policy to just whack those accounts. It's not necessary in most circumstances. So again, these are some bullets for you to really underscore things from an account management, a user account management perspective, what you need to be doing. One other point that I want to make here too, as it relates to sort of the iCloud account that many of your kind of employees really desire to use, we would second guess that as an authentication mechanism to the actual machine itself. There's a whole myriad, that's a webinar in and of itself, but again, you should be thinking secure local accounts that you can govern from a proper directory system, and clearly JumpCloud is going to be able to do that, but we'll get down to those details in our demo. So beyond account management, there's obviously a critical part of the account, which is the password. So you need to ensure that, number one, when you're handing someone their brand new shiny aluminum MacBook, that there is a mechanism to manage that password, meaning everyone can't be just putting simplistic passwords in. Those are obviously easy to pop. The bad guys love that. So again, strong policy settings using complexity are always important. And while there is some debate about updating and cycling through passwords on some periodic basis, we have the power and the flexibility to either make your employees change those passwords on some rotation basis or not. That's kind of where the sort of debate lies in the security industry right now. Is it better to not rotate your passwords and just put in a tough sentence that will take billions of years to crack? Or in the case of that, should you be rotating with shorter yet technical or sort of auto-generated passwords? So again, our company has a lot of opinions here, but we give you the flexibility to choose either approach. Moving on, make sure these boxes are full disk encrypted. Obviously, if your employee leaves their Mac OS X endpoint on the airplane in a taxi cab, you better have had that password set, and furthermore, that disk better be encrypted. So it's just mind-numbingly easy to extract data off a non-encrypted device. So just make sure using Jamf that you have full disk encrypted set, and don't worry about the password management with JumpCloud because we have you covered there, both managing the password for the encrypted volume of the user as well as the user's local account. Again, utilizing a product like Jamf and its policy settings, we would recommend that your firewalls are enabled on. Just at a minimum, utilizing Mac's own, bare essentials firewall. You can set policy to turn these on, and it's just a good prophylactic measure to make sure that you're not leaving any sort of vectors or pathways into that endpoint that the bad guys love. We're talking a lot about policies here, and Jamf has a wonderful mechanism to effectively point and click and set policy on Mac endpoints. JumpCloud, in addition to Mac, we do this for Windows and Linux as well, but specifically at a custom code level. You can script PowerShell, Bash, or Shell. In the case of Mac here, we're obviously talking about Shell, and execute that to do some very sort of low-level script execution against those machines. So either of us can help you in that area. But again, policy setting, extremely important. And this runs the gamut from, of course, we mentioned turning on file vault, but you may need screensavers sort of set among, other more sophisticated policies, like should you allow your employees to inject a storage volume into a USB port, and what should you do? What should the machine do if a storage volume is detected? Block it, allow it, etc. These are the kinds of policies you need to be modeling both on a group basis, meaning what groups of people have certain restrictions for their Macs. And again, both our products are very sophisticated tools to help you do that. Another, just a checklist item, each of your products should, in effect, have an antivirus installed. Again, it goes back to my points earlier about Mac, having this false sense of security around it. Whoever would think about installing, an antivirus on a Mac endpoint, you never needed to. Well, folks, you absolutely need to now. Again, because of the sophistication of the attacks that are happening. Tools like Panda, there are a zillion others now that have great support for macOS X, are absolute requirement. Again, if required, you can utilize Jamf to ensure that that antivirus product is installed on your endpoint. So we absolutely recommend AV. Every employee here at JumpCloud with our Macs and our Windows machines and our Linux machines, frankly, are all covered with antivirus. Another little known setting that many even well-versed security people overlook in Mac, which is really a standard policy on Windows, is the data execution prevention setting. It's found in security and privacy, but again, what this is doing is effectively ensuring that specific apps don't have specific mechanisms to execute processes or code injection on your machines. Very important, again, so that if the Trojan horse scenario happens, your Mac is going to be protected in a way where it's scrutinizing the actual process that is desiring to execute some code. So make sure that the DEP settings are set. We all here at JumpCloud, we're effectively a Mac shop. We all use Time Machine, so we all have an encrypted external volume, typically multi-terabyte, that gives us protection in case of a machine failure. From a security perspective, the point I want to drive home here is make sure that that external volume is also fully encrypted as well. Another aspect that you should be at least starting to think about is auditing. So one very interesting aspect that we're seeing, from our product use is the extraction of JSON objects. We are tracking all of the authentication events effectively that are happening on Mac endpoints, in addition to all the other operating systems we support. But you should be thinking about taking this type of information and including it into a larger kind of auditing kind of process. There are great products, Splunk is a great example, that can consume event information like this that can even assist with evaluating anomalies in sort of authentication. Like, man, how the heck did this person at this time frame from this IP address, effectively authenticate on that endpoint? That doesn't smell like the actual user. So again, or furthermore, an endpoint was authenticated or attempted to be authenticated more in excess of 3 or 4 times with failures. So should the machine get locked down, which JumpCloud can obviously help you with. So again, auditing the events that are happening on the endpoint should become at least part of your ongoing practice for security means. And lastly, remote administration. Really what this means is you have a remote user, and they're either in a home office or perhaps in a brick and mortar office where you have a number of employees, but your IT staff is elsewhere. The great thing about Jamf and JumpCloud is the fact that either of our products in the disciplines that we manage over Mac independently can help an IT administrator do so completely remotely. This means you don't physically need to be on the machine to do your work. Adding user accounts, setting policy, changing administrative versus standard user settings, among a myriad of other things. So in this case, make sure you have an ability to actually affect the behavior of machines without physically being next to or touching the machine. Sounds obvious, but often it's harder to do than you think unless you're using fairly sophisticated tools like Jamf or JumpCloud. So now let's get into some of the specifics related to system and user management on your Macs. So first and foremost, your objectives. Again, we're in the theme here of thinking about sort of helping you with a playbook. These 6 things should be sort of on your roadmap as you're thinking about your system and the user management of the accounts on those systems. So your objectives: 1, how do you centralize your user identities so that they get access to the resources? And again, Mac is one of your employees' resources at an enterprise level. 2, do you have the capability to execute commands against those machines no matter where they are? 3, do you have a mechanism to have complete visibility over those endpoints, those assets, no matter where they are? And 4, do you have a mechanism to effectively roll out patches? Meaning these systems, your Macs, and frankly if you're using Windows and Linux as well, are going to require updating. Mac people love to just hit that shiny button that says your new version of Mac is here, but do you want them to do that? So being able to control that is very important. The 5th area we talked about, which is password management, is extremely important. And again, this in the case of Mac includes both keychain, multi-factor authentication, which JumpCloud can help you with on your Mac endpoints, and file vault, which we covered a few minutes ago. And finally, again, hitting on the remote management aspects is important, but can you do it without the need for a VPN to actually hit that endpoint? Again, all very important things to consider. So now let's move into an area before we pass the mic over to our friend Jonah at Jamf about something near and dear to JumpCloud's heart, and that is directory. How does macOS, sort of interoperate with the classic directory? So there are common approaches to managing Mac OS X from a centralized directory standpoint. All of you, I would venture to guess, have heard of Microsoft's Active Directory. That isn't necessarily tuned for direct integration with Mac OS X, but there are other vendors that can layer on top of AD in order to create an effective connection to your Mac endpoints. Apple themselves has their own open directory, but recently they have been fairly vocal about their sort of opacity around open directory, meaning they're not quite sure what they want to do with it. And let's face it, a Mac Mini on your desk, a physical device running Mac OS X server, isn't an enterprise directory, and I think they realize that. The reality of many of our customers is present in the 3rd bullet point, there is no management, or they're manually, meaning physically managing these laptops. They're ordering them en masse. They're handing the box over to their new employee, and that's it. They let the employee log in, set up the Mac, and guess what? They're administrators, that they're entirely unmanaged. But in the fourth and fifth bullet points, this is something that is extremely important to us and hopefully to you, which is the Jamf and JumpCloud combination, the 1-2 punch, so to speak, of managing the sort of core directory services, that's JumpCloud, and then all of the management facility over your Mac endpoints, and that naturally is Jamf. So with that said, and as a segue, let's talk about us for a second. Can we talk about us? I want to sort of bring to light the integration, and really at the sort of expensive sounding cliche, and I've said this before, the sort of peanut butter and jelly scenario that is Jamf Pro and JumpCloud. We have tons of our own customers that are paying both of us to utilize us in concert with one another. And we're here to talk to you a little bit about that and the advantages of using our products together. I look at the Jamf and JumpCloud combo as like two very tightly intertwined puzzle pieces. For those of you using Jamf right now in the audience, you know it very well. You're using it for various aspects, and Jonah is going to get into the low-level details of Jamf, but you're using it for imaging, setting up those machines, license management, device enrollment, not only for Mac OS X, but also for your iOS endpoints. JumpCloud, on the other hand, is the analog of utilizing an Active Directory without having to use Microsoft. So as I will get into in part of my demonstration, we are considered the core underlying directory. We're the thing that's sitting behind a Jamf and all the other resources that the employee needs. We're controlling the authentication and the authorization to an employee's systems, like their MacBook, their networks, like their Wi-Fi authentication and VPN authentication, and their applications, both web apps through SSO, as well as traditional on-premise or legacy applications that require LDAP. So again, think of us as the sort of a modern interpretation of a traditional directory. When you get into the very specific low-level details, we look at Jamf and JumpCloud as the triangulation of management over a Mac endpoint. So we both are serving the Mac in two very distinct ways. We both will have agent architecture installed to remotely manage these endpoints. In the case of JumpCloud, we're doing, as mentioned, the core directory things. We're managing the account on the box and that account's password. We're setting multi-factor authentication to protect the machine among the Wi-Fi access that Mac endpoint is requiring to get on a network. While Jamf, through its agent architecture, is connected to us, so it knows what users, what groups that those users belong to for the overall JSS management, but it is connected to that Mac endpoint to do all of its, sort of blissful remote management, everything from device enrollment to software installation to the myriad of things Jonah is about to talk to. So with that said, I'm now going to introduce my friend and partner in crime up in the great state of Minnesota, Jonah Clavesol. Jonah, I'm happy to have you here.
Happy to be here, Greg. Thanks. So yeah, thanks, Greg. Really what I'd like to do at the time is kind of show you the tools that Apple gives us at Jamf combined with the directory services from JumpCloud. And it's funny to see that one line in your triangle, Greg. It seems so simple, but it's such a critical piece to what I would say an efficient process for managing Macs. Because as you said, they're becoming more and more prolific, and we're seeing all these great ways of making them easier, and I'll get to kind of at the end, less expensive to manage sometimes than their Windows counterparts. Again, my name is Jonah Clavesol. I'm on our alliances team here at Jamf. I've been here for just about 10 years now and really seen this industry change quite a bit. And I'm excited to work with our partners that we consider strategic to helping the Mac growth in the space. And really, it's just finding the right tools is really all people need at this point. Before I dive in, you brought up your stats, Greg, and I wanted to throw in a slide I actually grabbed from July of last year as well. I think a lot of people think about the Mac platform as being for creatives or designers or maybe executives here and there. I had the opportunity to attend the Cisco Live conference last year in Las Vegas, and on their wall in their network operations center, they had all the operating systems listed that were connecting to their hotspots. Now, no one was using the hotel Wi-Fi at this point because the Cisco stuff was way better, and I thought this is extremely telling. The number of Mac devices and iOS devices that we saw amongst engineers, security officers, developers, network admins, very, very technical folks, really IT-centric, and I think this kind of flips the mantra of, oh, Macs are really only for creatives on its head when we saw this many devices out there at a conference like Cisco Live. So I thought that was a pretty cool statistic. Wanted to share it, and I'll be taking the same picture at the 2017 Cisco Live conference this year, too. So a little bit about Jamf. I think we have a few Jamf customers on the line today, which is great. Thank you. Keep me honest in my presentation, please. But for those of you who haven't heard of us, we are Jamf. We're from Minneapolis, and yes, it snowed today. But we're not going to talk about that. But we're fairly unique in this space in that we are an Apple-only management tool. Our sole purpose in life, why we get up every day and why we've been successful is because we are helping organizations succeed with the Apple platform. I would say the industry has changed significantly in the last 10 years that I've been here. But really all we're seeing is that percentage grow and grow as more and more people want to adopt this platform in their environment for user productivity, for retaining talent and attracting talent, and just for lower overall cost. So we are Apple only, but that gives us some pretty unique perspectives into how the devices are being used, and also means that our product is developed at the same pace as Apple. Those of you who may not be aware on the line, Apple does yearly updates to both macOS and iOS, and now tvOS. So it's a pretty constant pace. If you're used to the Windows deployment and testing phase, you got to be a little bit faster on the Apple side, and we help enable that. A little bit about Jamf, though, for those of you who haven't heard of us, we are over 600 employees in 9 different countries, and we've been doing this for a long time. We've actually been founded in 2002, and as of last week, we were on a little over 7.5 million devices under management across 10,000 customers. And what's really important to us is that every year, 95% of those customers renew with us. Yes, the product works very well, but really that's a testament to our support team, which is a good chunk of the people you see in the background there that pick up the phone and walk users through their questions. Another piece that's really cool I want to share on the line today is we've also sort of accidentally created this huge community of Apple administrators. So regardless of where you are in your Apple journey, if you're new or if you've been doing this for a while, check out jamfnation.com. This is a huge collection of, I would say, the top Apple admins in the world, sharing ideas, talking about strategy, sharing some cool stuff they're doing with JumpCloud and things like that, and really worth checking out and becoming a member of. You don't have to be a customer of Jamf. The resources there for you to enjoy. So I'm going to be talking today about Jamf Pro. And Greg talked about a lot of the kind of common tasks that we see, right? It's changing passwords, removing guest accounts, making sure things are secure, enabling a different DEP acronym, device execution protection, and just making sure these devices are, I guess, good corporate citizens. And I think a lot of people start to look at this, and this is a very time-consuming process, but Jamf, combined with JumpCloud, can automate a lot of this stuff. And what Jamf Pro does is complete management of all your Apple devices, everything from deployment, so how we get them into the user's hands or how we get existing devices managed, how would you configure those devices? Greg talked a lot about security policies. So much can fit into native tools of the OS to set passcode policies, determine what applications we can run, and things like that. Very robust ways of deploying applications. So either it's an update to an antivirus product, or want to make sure somebody has the latest version of the operating system, or we have users requesting apps that need to be productive. Very easy way of deploying apps either in-house or through the App Store or through pre-built installers. Inventory, I think just as important as security, or to security rather, as some of the policies we put in place. Understanding what devices I have out there, where they are they compliant, and are they current and up to date. Inventory is not an exciting topic, but we gather more information than pretty much anything else that we've seen, and we tie into a lot of other popular systems, so you can see that inventory in one spot. Security enforcement is huge. Greg's already talked a lot about that. And then we have self-service, which is a big differentiator between us and I would say a lot of the other kind of simplified Mac management products out there. In addition, again, good corporate citizen. We're available on cloud or on-premise or in the cloud, seeing a huge transition to cloud, which is why we're all here right now. We are an agent, as Greg mentioned, plus the built-in framework that Apple uses for mobile device management. And I mention this because We're not installing a complex framework of applications. We're not doing things our own Jamf way. 100% of what we do to manage the Apple devices is using tools that Apple provides for us. There's a couple big advantages to that. One is maintaining that user experience. We're not putting another layer on top of the operating system that users have to interact with. Stuff just works. It gives us the ability to stay current with Apple. So every release of every operating system from Apple gets more and more enterprise friendly. They get more administrative and security features. We want to be able to take advantage of those. So rather than rewrite our framework, we're just using Apple's. And we're also, it's a very simple, lightweight management tool we're putting on top of the machine that doesn't affect the end users at all. We tie into many different tools you may be using already in your environment today. So heavy integration with JumpCloud, other single sign-on engines. I mentioned inventory. We have inventory plugins for both ServiceNow and SCCM, so you can take all your Apple devices and view them in that one console. And typically what we see is that we want one console to manage all our devices, when in reality what that means is the guy or gal with a C in front of their title sitting in front of the corner office with Windows, they just want to see everything in one spot. So we give them that ability to see all their assets, but the people doing the work day to day are using Jamf to provide that best user experience. And deep integration with the Apple deployment programs, which I'm going to talk about here. So let's talk just for a minute about the technology. And I think some folks on the line may be familiar with this already, but if you're not, there's a traditional way that we do provisioning or deployment. And I think everyone on the line either does this today or has done this at some point in time in their life. We purchase a device from a reseller, corporate reseller, Apple retail store, so on and so forth. IT preloads an image on that machine. And this is an image that's maintained by sometimes one or two people. It's constantly updated. We're trying it out on different hardware, so on and so forth. And inevitably, there's always an update. It's either Patch Tuesday or it's an update for Google Chrome or some other app that we use. So there's a constant kind of care and feeding of that image that's required. What we've seen a lot, especially in corporate environments, is, hey, we preload all these machines and they have to sit for a little while. Either the user doesn't start until next week, or maybe they're in training for a couple days. And again, we get that delta between what we had current and what's current now based on updates that are available. And then finally, it's shipped to the user, and probably a few minutes of post-configuration and some additional hands-on time from IT to make the user fully productive on that machine right away. Now, this has been the way we've all been doing things for many, many years, and there's nothing wrong with this. It's just a lot of touch points from IT and the end user, and every one of these arrows incurs its own cost. So Apple, in the last couple of years, has really been trying to find a way to streamline this, and that's actually done through what's called the Apple Device Enrollment Program, or DEP. So a different acronym for you. I'll try to do the full one here so not get confused. But this is really changing how IT can deploy these devices en masse, and it lowers the cost of management by a huge amount because of how well this is automated. And what's different from the traditional workflow is the reseller ships the machine directly to the user. So it doesn't have to go to a centralized depot. It can go right to the user's desk. The user initiates the setup themselves, so they get to enjoy that unboxing experience, and then it's automatically configured using Jamf. Now, before you freak out and think, oh, I would never let a user configure their own machine, this is where the integration we have with JumpCloud can be extremely effective, because I can ship out a fleet of MacBooks to my entire remote sales team. At Jamf, we have a lot of remote sales folks, so when we do updates, I don't want them all to come back in here, or I don't want to ship the machines into Jamf, set them up, and then ship them back out again. We're going to ship the Mac directly to that user. They open the box, they configure it, and based on who they are in our directory services, who they are in JumpCloud, sorry, Greg, I told you I was going to do that. Who they are in JumpCloud and what group they're in determines how the machine is set up. So there's a lot less time being very specific about who gets what. So the Device Enrollment Program has been around for a couple of years now. It's very, very mature, and it's being used across most industries that we work with. But let me walk you through the process if you haven't seen it yet, and kind of how things are a bit different. We're really big on the fact that all starts with the box. I think anybody who's ever opened an Apple product, there is just something about unwrapping that machine yourself. The way we do it here at Jamf is we give the user a machine, and it's literally open box, power on the Mac, and there is no step 3, love IT. We've got a very touchy-feely IT department here. But there's tons of data that shows that if you give the user a machine that's new and let them enjoy that experience, there's a lot better care taken of the machine. There's a personal sense of ownership. That keeps the resale value up. There's less hardware repairs required. They just take better care of it. But as Greg said, the kind of concern that happens from this is, well, I don't want a user to just put a machine on the network that's not set up properly or that's not compliant. But this is how the device enrollment program ties all this stuff in. So if you ever set up a Mac before, you've seen this. We select our region, we select our keyboard, we get on a network. And again, this doesn't have to be a corporate network. With a cloud-based solution like Jamf and JumpCloud, we don't need to have the machine on the corporate network. I can do this from a Starbucks or my house or my remote office or anywhere with wireless. The one piece that's different is we see this screen that says configuration available. This Mac will be configured automatically by Jamf software, call with questions, that kind of thing. If you notice, there's no skip button. There's no cancel button here. This is a really good way from a security standpoint of assigning corporate ownership to a device. So if a user walks away with their hardware and goes to wipe the machine and use it for their own personal gain, it's going to re-enroll automatically again. So this is a really nice way of assigning a corporate asset and keeping track of that asset and having it always be managed again if need be. Here, we see our first integration with JumpCloud. So in this particular case, this is Nick Thompson from our marketing department who built this for me. He's logging in with his directory credentials. And immediately, based on who he is and where he is physically, that determines how his machine is set up. He and I have exactly the same MacBook 13 touch bar, but he gets a different set of software than I do because I'm on our sales team and he's in marketing. That's all defined through JumpCloud. From that, we can create a local account. Again, concerns about local admin accounts, we can change this after the fact. And then we see this screen setting up your Mac, and it's done. This process from unboxing to powering on to connecting to getting enrolled really only takes about 2 to 3 minutes to set up. And then once that happens, that machine is managed. So this looks like a standard Mac desktop, and it is. It's a standard Mac environment with one little change. We're going to notify the user that we're installing software, installing security settings, and prompting the checkout self-service. That's it. So there's no hands-on time from IT, and we can do this at huge scale because it's the end user that's setting this up themselves. So what's actually happening here is a couple different things. First of all, the machine's being configured using the device enrollment program from Apple and Jamf. But we're also installing some software. And again, this can be your internal software packages you built. These can be third-party packages like Office 365 or Adobe Creative Cloud, or we can use the volume purchase program from Apple to make App Store apps very easy to deploy. We're also applying security settings. So these are not scripts necessarily that we have to write. We're not putting in third-party frameworks here. We are using the tools that Apple gives us through mobile device management to secure that machine and then report on its status. For those of you who don't know about a couple of these Apple technologies, the volume purchase program, again, evolving every year from Apple, it's automatic distribution of App Store apps. So you don't have to manually grab these or build packages. You can just present them to the user and have them be automatically installed. A big change in recent years has been it's personal or device-based. And what that means is you don't have to mess around with Apple IDs. If you have concerns about that or had to do that in previous deployments, that is not an issue anymore. I can assign applications to a specific device if I want to. And it's a free program. You just sign up and you can start taking advantage of that. Now, mobile device management is really the same on the Mac as it is on mobile. Native controls from Apple. They enforce everything from security to mail configuration to wireless to certificates. This is how we do a lot of, I would say, kind of the back-end IT work. They're delivered over the air. So again, the machine doesn't have to be on the corporate network to get these settings. So if you're in an environment that has, say, secure Wi-Fi, you have a chicken and egg problem. How do I get a machine on wireless because I need a certificate without getting on the wireless network? Well, we enroll in the guest network. Jamf automatically deploys a configuration profile that has a certificate, and that gets the user on the corporate network. If you've been using Windows for a long time, what I hear a lot and what makes a lot of sense in comparison is this is really group policy object-like functionality for the Mac. Same premise, same controls that are there. So we've got our machine set up, we've got our binary deployed, and really what makes this different now is we're going to provide self-service for the users. And again, big tie-in to JumpCloud and how this makes this easier. You have a choice in how you want to set up your machine. For a user in the field, they can get a certain set of applications automatically, or you can present them with this App Store concept. Everybody here really knows how to use an App Store. We've done it for a long time now. But what I can do is, as an end user, I can come into self-service, and this is what I'm allowed to do on my machine. I can download books from IT. I can, actually we have request an iPhone in here as a hardware request. I can run maintenance. I can install applications. But again, this is where you can get a machine in a user's hand and use their directory membership to determine what they get. I'm in sales here, so I don't get Creative Suite or Final Cut or any of the fun stuff. I am stuck with HipChat, Outlook, and that's pretty much what I use along with the web browser most of the time during the day. But what's really nice about self-service is that I do not need to be a local admin user to do admin tasks. And why this is important is, as you look at securing Macs in your environment, a lot of people look at, well, I don't want my users to be local admins. You can take away those admin rights from the users, but still give them access to self-service and not generate enormous amounts of help desk tickets. If anybody's done this in the past, you know that if you take admin rights away from the users, it's torches and pitchforks outside your office door. But if you give them the tools and self-service, they won't bug you anymore. For example, here at Jamf, we've got a maintenance task that you can see here, which solves, honestly, the majority of our help desk tickets. This is Tier 0 and Tier 1 support right in an app. Before calling IT, I run maintenance. It might do all sorts of things in the background. I don't need to be a local admin. And then it restarts my machine, which, as we all know, fixes the majority of problems, and I'm good to go. If I do need to generate a ticket with IT, they know I've run this already. They can look at logs within the Jamf console to identify any issues. They're going to be much more effective at fixing my issue. So self-service has really been a huge, huge tool for us at Jamf, tying into JumpCloud for access and just making it really easy for users to interact with their machines. So it's kind of a glance on the technology here that Apple gives us, kind of enabled by Jamf. But the reason I'm talking about some of this is I want to leave you guys all with a thought before we get to Greg's demo, in that one of the things that we hear typically is, well, I'd like to deploy Macs in my environment, but they're expensive. Well, we've seen a lot of data over the last couple of years about the reality of that statement. And actually, a lot of this comes from a presentation that Fletcher Prebin, the VP of Information Technology for IBM, gave at our big user conference in both 2016 and 2015. IBM, just to put things in context, the inventor of the personal computer introduced a choice program back in 2016. In 2015, they went to about 30,000 Macs by the end of the year. Last year, in 2016, when Fletcher presented an update for the group, they're at the 100,000 Macs. So they're able to do this through, again, good management tasks, good integration with cloud services, and really just realizing that the platform, when managed right, can be less expensive. And let me explain how. Every machine we have has some base services on it, right? We have to pay for power, we have Office licenses, we have servers to do software distribution, and then we have JumpCloud as our directory service. Essential hardware and software that we need in order to just get the machine on the network, I would agree with the argument that sometimes Apple hardware is more expensive on that initial acquisition than an equivalent Windows machine, but we get a lot with that. We get deployment frameworks built in. We actually get antivirus software built into the Mac itself, a tool called XProtect. We get full disk encryption built in, and we get all of our we get all of our updates included with that hardware. On the Windows side, you may or may not get Windows for free. You may or may not get a version of Windows for free that has full disk encryption. You always have to pay for a third-party antivirus solution, and then there's oftentimes different deployment tools that you may need in order to do that. So we start to see a little bit of a disparity here. We get to management. We'll use Jamf on the Mac side. SCCM and Intune are the most common ones we see on the Windows side. And yes, I understand that some people get those for free as part of their Microsoft agreement. But again, we're starting to see just a little bit of disparity or even parity here. Where we really see the change, really see the difference, is in the cost for the help desk and the number of staff to actually manage all these machines. And this is a gross oversimplification, but what we've seen from the majority of our customers is that it costs them less money to have staff to support their Macs in their environment because of tools like Jamf and JumpCloud and what Apple builds into the OS to make these things really easy to manage. So IBM claims to save everywhere from $200 to $500 per machine that they deploy. I'm not going to say you're going to see that. I'm not going to promise that to you, but you might. And looking at this information that we have and what we're seeing across a huge number of customers is, yeah, they might be a little more expensive to acquire a Mac at first, but you put good IT processes in place, and we're going to see a gap in that total cost of ownership over the life of that machine with the tools that we have in there. So going to kind of take a break here and turn it back over to Greg. Want to lay the foundation for the technology that we use and how we tie into JumpCloud. And I'll turn it over to Greg to dive into the demo here.
Jonah, that was awesome. Thank you so much. And in fact, I'm really anxious and hungry to see your 2017, photo of that Cisco screen. That was awesome data. I have not seen that.
No problem.
Well, cool. All right, here is the sort of nuts and bolts part of our presentation here, which is an actual live fire demonstration of the integration between Jamf and Jamf. You see, Jonah, it's not just you. We were destined to be together between Jamf and JumpCloud. So my goal today is to utilize our products. Right now on your screen, you're looking at the JumpCloud administrative interface, and my next tab over is the Jamf JSS admin interface. We're going to isolate the specific area of integration, which is leveraging the LDAP protocol to glue us together. But then we'll go through the whole mechanism of how an account is created, how Jamf JSS will consume that account and its group membership, and furthermore, the deployment of that user account. As you see here, I have a parallels box with macOS on it. So consider this a live machine, a remote machine. It just happens to be a VM, and we'll be picking on this in just a second. So let's begin the process. Excuse me for 1 second while I cough. Sorry about that. Let's begin the process like many of our organizations, which is the institution of an identity into the corporate directory, that being JumpCloud in this case, and it's a very simple affair. So in this view, you're looking at the list of users that are in the current directory. Right now, this directory has 185. It could have thousands. It really does not matter. It's a cloud-based directory. There's nothing installed on-premise. So therefore, your directory, like Jamf, lives in the cloud with no management hassle or overhead, such as a directory server and all the hardware and software that are required. All that goes away because of our SaaS-based delivery. JumpCloud is responsible as a directory for resource binding of an identity to three things, if you generalize in this way: an employee's systems, Mac, Windows, or Linux systems, an employee's applications, and again, those can be cloud-based apps or on-premise applications, and finally, networks. And we'll go through this in just a few minutes, but again, my focus here is really to show the integration. So let's begin. I'm going to build a brand new user account, and Jonah, I'm going to pick on you. In fact, I'm going to pick on us both.
That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, buddy. So Jonah Keller, how about that for the lack of creativity? Your username will be jonah.keller. And your email in our organization will be jonah.keller@demojumpcloud.com. As a directory, I have the capability to fire off this. Yes, I just had one of my staff say, Keller, you misspelled it. There we go, demojumpcloud.com. So as a directory, we can immediately activate this account, which I will do as an administrator, or I could fire off an email to the actual person so that they can activate their own account and set their own password. Very similar to Jamf, our product provides an end user portal to do self-management, such as password resets. But again, just for the sake of a crisp demo, I'm going to activate this user just like this. Great. So now I've got Jonah added. Let's actually take a look at Jonah so you can see the account once it's activated. So here's Jonah, and let's refresh. And let's go deeper into my directory. Let me refresh. There we are. Now, what I can do immediately is start to provision access to various resources. And again, we're going to jump into the JSS tool in just a second. First, I've got to drop Jonah on his machine. In fact, it's this is my Parallels instance that's sitting in the background right there. So I'm going to add Jonah immediately to his MacBook, And in fact, I'm going to leave him as a standard user for now. In addition, I can create accounts for Jonah in Google and Office 365, literally provisioning those accounts to those services. So great, we've got Jonah all set and provisioned out to those particular services. But let's jump into Jamf now. Jamf and JumpCloud are integrated through the LDAP protocol. Jamf quite literally is seeing JumpCloud as an open LDAP server. That is due to the fact that JumpCloud supports a complete standard RFC 2307 open LDAP interface. We smell, taste, and feel just like LDAP as one of the protocols to our very robust proprietary directory infrastructure. Let's take a look at that integration. So I'll jump into LDAP, into the integration screen in JSS, and this JumpCloud LDAP instance is the one that's currently connected. So let's test things first. So I want to go in and test Jonah's account and see that he is there. So the first is, let's test and look for the username. So jonah.keller, and let's test. There he is. So we know through LDAP that Jonah actually exists there. And in fact, I even misspelled my own name in the email. So that's cool. I've just discovered that. But Jonah is also going to be an administrator and should be part of a LDAP group, and then by extension, a group within JSS. Let's go check that. So I'm going to, again, put in jonah.keller. And I'm going to look for the user group called admin Jamf JSS Suite. And let's test if he's a member there. No. So this signals to me that I need to make a change in the corporate directory. And it's as simple as this. I'll head over into JumpCloud, into our grouping mechanism. I have that same group called admin Jamf JSS Suite. Let me edit the group membership. Inside, clearly, Jonah is not there. So I will simply add Jonah. Let me search for his account, Jonah. Here he is. And I'm going to select him and add him to this group. Now, when I return back to the group membership test, it still says no. Let me retest. And voila. That quickly, all through cloud-based integration, that group membership is now live and in effect within JSS. Now let's go bring Jonah's account actually into Jamf. And how do you do that? It's very simple. I'll go into all settings, and once I refresh here, I will jump into my JSS user accounts. There we are. So let's jump in here, and I need to add a new account. And I will select an LDAP account, which of course Jonah is being considered by Jamf at this point. So I'll hit next. I'm going to search for jonah.keller and hit next. And again, we have appropriately found the user account, and I simply will add Jonah into the directory, and I'm going to provide some specific access points. So in this case, Jonah, what should he have? Group access, site access, or full access? I'm going to give him full. From a privilege aspect, he is quite literally going to be an administrator, so I'm going to give him all sort of account privs everywhere that Jonah needs to get access, because Jonah is going to help administer the JSS infrastructure. I hit save. And once it's done with its processing, we'll add this user account into JSS appropriately. So while that's baking, here we are. I'll hit done. And Jonah, as you can see, is now part of the JSS directory. But meanwhile, remember, I've added Jonah to his own MacBook. Let's go take a look here. So here's Jonah's brand new MacBook, and many of our customers have sort of a local account that's sort of an administrative account. That's what you're looking at here. Let's just log in as this account very quickly.
Which, of course, Jamf can manage that admin account for you as well. Adding it on a machine, have it, rolling the passwords on a schedule, all that kind of fun stuff.
Absolutely. So in the background, our agent every 60 seconds is effectively asking JumpCloud, what work do I need to do? Do I need to add new user accounts? Do I need to execute a command, enable multi-factor, whatever, all those things. And in this case, we can see that Jonah has already been sort of provisioned down to this machine immediately. In fact, during the course of me demonstrating GSS, that account, the moment that I hit Jonah's save on his account, that user account literally was fired off to this machine and a local account created. If I log out of our admin account, which I'll do here, we will see Mr. Jonah, as expected, right here. And this is a live portion of what Jonah showed you in the screenshots. I'm going to enter in the JumpCloud password, and Jonah now will begin his boot up process. Behind the scenes, just as Jonah showed you, Jamf is managing a lot of that sort of login process. There could be a log-on event that is installing software and doing all of its sort of, account instantiation, checking against the JumpCloud directory. All of that, is applicable. But this is how seamless all this stuff works. Again, here it is. We're now signing in. We don't need Apple iCloud because we're using a JumpCloud user account, not the user's iCloud account. And on your way, again, I'm showing you a very typical Mac setup, but this would be combined with Jamf's setup to show the login event. So with that said, I think that is a pretty crisp place to stop. I'm looking exactly at 12:02 our time, keeping you guys relatively on time miraculously, because I think Jonah and I love to talk about these solutions. And again, we would just like to say thank you for coming to this webinar today. I also have noted that there are a number of questions that we have technical staff here that are answering them. So if you haven't been answered yet, even after you log off, we'll make sure you get appropriate answers. And finally, everyone listening now and those that couldn't make it today will receive an email follow-up with the recorded presentation, so you can watch this at your own time and leisure. Jonah, any final closing remarks?
Greg, actually, yeah. One thing that I really spaced on mentioning that goes right along line with your demo for creating a new user is, if you look at the typical software deployment task for an admin, it's user calls and thinks they need an app or requests an application. I go find the installer. I install it on the user's machine either remotely, or I give it to them, or I do desk side. One of the big benefits of the integration with JumpCloud is, in order for Greg to give me access to an application, he just adds me to a group in JumpCloud. So if you think about that for just 1 minute, you can have a directory administrator or somebody who doesn't know anything about the Mac platform able to install and grant access to software just by using JumpCloud and adding that user to a group. It's been a huge time saver, and again, kind of goes back to that staff and help desk stack in the graph I showed you that in my prezo. So I can't believe I spaced on mentioning that, but definitely wanted to bring it up before we wrapped up today.
That's cool. Yeah, that is incredibly powerful. Again, it's directory stuff, and that's what Jamf is deferring to, and it's really easy to do within JumpCloud. But again, we hope that this was insightful for the folks that joined today. Please, any follow-up questions, both Jonah and I would love to get back to you. And again, you will all receive emails with all the material, including the recording of this video, in roughly less than a week's time. Jonah, on behalf of all of us here, thank you so much for participating. And for everyone out there, have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.